You've probably heard it a million times by now, right? This completely unified narrative blasting out of Silicon Valley boardrooms, AI is the future, and human labor is basically obsolete. Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're diving into a fascinating analysis by tech commentator Mo Bitar. And let me tell you, this completely rips the lid off the massive disconnect between all that glittering boardroom hype and the gritty, honestly frustrating reality for everyday workers on the ground. We are going to look at a very, very different perspective on what AI is actually doing to the modern workplace.
Okay, let's get right into it. Is AI actually taking your job, or is it just taking your leverage? Look, if you've been feeling a spike in workplace anxiety lately, wondering if some algorithm is literally about to take your desk, this analysis totally validates what you're feeling, but it seriously questions the root cause. The mainstream story tells us human workers are on the chopping block because the tech is just so good. But the source material argues something way more interesting. This widespread fear isn't just some accidental byproduct of new tech. It might actually be a highly effective, totally deliberate strategy to keep you, the worker, on the defensive.
So, where is this coming from? To understand it, the analysis points us straight at the mentalities of top tech leaders, specifically calling out folks like Anthropic's Dario Amodei. The source characterizes their mindset with a hypothetical corporate goal, an OKR, that basically just says, I want 0 humans employed. Now, whether or not a CEO actually wrote that on a whiteboard somewhere, the argument here is that constantly going on the news and predicting a totally jobless future, it's the ultimate marketing pitch. I mean, it signals massive progress to investors, but even more importantly, it deliberately spooks the labor force. And according to the source, this sets up a very specific and honestly pretty insidious 3-step corporate playbook. Step 1, you spook labor with the looming threat of AI replacing them. Step 2, you use that pervasive fear to suppress wages. Just think about it. If you genuinely believe an AI could do your job by next Tuesday, you are way less likely to march into your boss's office today and demand a 20% raise, right? You're just keeping your head down, hoping not to get fired. And then step 3, companies take all those payroll savings, the raises they didn't have to hand out, and divert that cash straight into massive contracts for AI companies like Anthropic. The whole ecosystem profits off the narrative, and the terrified worker just accepts lower pay. But this macro-level wage suppression doesn't just stay trapped in a boardroom. It trickles all the way down to your desk and completely alters your daily life. It changes how you are managed and how you are measured, and that brings us to what the source emphatically calls one of the most deranged, absolutely dystopian things to ever come out of Silicon Valley: the token budget. Let's break down what this jargon actually means for you. A token budget is this new algorithmic corporate metric. But here's the catch. Instead of measuring your actual value or the quality of your work or your genuine real-world productivity, it literally just measures your raw AI output and how much of the company's AI budget you're burning through. It turns the concept of a worker's true value completely upside down. You're not being judged on your skill or your precision anymore. You're being judged on the sheer volume of AI prompts and outputs you can pump out. Imagine actually working under a system like this. The source points to reports of companies like Facebook actually implementing token leaderboards. So if you work there, suddenly you're forced to produce massive volumes of AI-generated content, which the source very bluntly just calls slop, all just to appear productive to an algorithm. There's this immense, daily, grinding pressure to blindly generate AI output just to survive the leaderboard. You have to prove you're using the shiny new corporate toys, even if the output is completely useless. Now, let's talk about the number 0 for a second. You would naturally think the person sitting pretty at the top of a productivity leaderboard is doing the most valuable work for the company, right? Well, the source reveals a massive, glaring flaw in this system. There's actually an inverse relationship between topping that token leaderboard and producing real quality. In fact, the number 1 person on that leaderboard is reportedly reviewing 0 code, literally 0. It highlights a complete collapse of quality control. The system is just rewarding pure, unrefined volume and totally ignoring actual human oversight or skill. To really get why this matters so much, we have to rewind a bit and look at the history of workplace monitoring. Corporate surveillance used to be incredibly clunky. Back in the day, companies tried tracking lines of code, but engineers rightfully pushed back, saying, hey, writing fewer, more efficient lines is actually better. Then, companies tried literally taking screenshots of workers' monitors, which, let's be honest, felt like a 19th century factory boss breathing down your neck and caused massive employee backlash. But today, current surveillance uses these algorithmic token budgets. It acts as this perfect, frictionless proxy for productivity. It spins a highly futuristic narrative for investors, all while quietly keeping the labor force strictly in check. And this perfectly sets up a stark contrast that systematically dismantles the mainstream narrative we hear every day. On one hand, you've got the boardroom myth. This is championed by executives like NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, who go around promoting the idea that spending up to $250,000 per employee on AI tokens automatically equals true productivity. The myth is that AI is doing all the heavy lifting for you. But then you have the worker reality. For the actual employee, AI often acts like an insanely unreliable autocomplete. It spits out imprecise work that requires massive human cleanup. For so many workers, AI hasn't automated their job away at all. It's just created a frustrating second job where you're the janitor for the AI's messes, all for the exact same pay.
And honestly, there is a deep irony to all this supreme boardroom confidence. The source highlights this great quote that captures the honest sentiment from agile, cutting-edge startup founders who are out there admitting, dude, we don't know how to use this. We don't know how to make this work in our company. It really adds a touch of dark humor to the whole situation. Think about it. If small, super nimble tech startups can't even figure out how to genuinely integrate AI into their workflows, there is absolutely no way that massive Fortune 500 companies with 80,000 employees spread across 40 time zones have it perfectly dialed in. They are largely just winging it to keep the narrative alive.
Which brings us to the core epiphany of today's explainer. We've talked about the frustrating reality, but what are the true technical limits of large language models that cause all this? The source actually coins a fundamental law of AI utility to explain it. They call it the Binner-Tarr lesson, and this is exactly why AI is creating that second job we were just talking about. Here's how the BTAR lesson breaks it down. Large language models operate entirely on approximation. They can easily approximate language and intent to get you about 80% of the way to a finished product. But here's the secret. That 80% was always the easy part. The remaining 20%, that is the insurmountable wall of human precision. The more precision a task requires, the less useful the AI becomes. It gets really close, but it never actually makes contact with exactly what you need. That hardest final 20% is always left entirely on the shoulders of the skilled human worker. And that leads us to such an incredibly empowering takeaway from the source material. You are way, way more valuable than the AI, because human intent and exact precision are the true bottlenecks in literally any workflow. Your skilled human labor is actually becoming more essential right now, not less. The analysis passionately argues that workers absolutely shouldn't be cowering in fear of job loss or accepting weird pay cuts. In reality, because you are now tasked with doing the hardest 20%, plus cleaning up the AI's imprecise messes, your salary should effectively be doubling. So, what's the actual actionable advice here? How do everyday workers push back against these wild metrics and boardroom stories? The source lays out 3 really firm strategies. First, publicly share honest stories. Get on YouTube, get on TikTok, and just speak the truth about what is actually working and what definitely isn't in your company. Break that unified corporate narrative. Second, boldly reject the slop budget. Just resist the urge to game the token leaderboard, and instead, intentionally keep your work slow, deliberate, and focused. And third, focus entirely on quality and what the customer actually wants. An AI cannot tell you what a human customer desires. Only human empathy and precision can do that. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative question to chew on. Next time you're at your desk, look around and ask yourself, who is actually benefiting from the AI metrics in your workplace? Is it genuinely making the product better? Is it truly serving the customer? Or is it simply a tool to generate a futuristic narrative that pumps up the boardroom while keeping your leverage firmly in check? Keep that in the back of your mind the next time you see someone bragging about a token leaderboard. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me today, and keep learning.